Dr. Powell is not a stranger to the brown bag. He has presented on a number of topics. One that I still remember very well is about children with disabilities. Ladies and gentlemen, help me to welcome Dr. Powell.
I'm talking about a program which has been in operation for 10 years and which was originally conceptualized under NAP 1 as an entry point for services for orphans and vulnerable children. So as that problem has receded a little bit over the years, it's now evolved in a more general program for all children. Right. As I said, it's been going for 10 years, developed in support of originally developed in support of the Ministry of Education's program of introducing ECD as a compulsory component of the primary education system, and then under the NAP evolved as a program for orphans and vulnerable children. Next slide, please. The program has a number of components. The main one, which sort of drives the program, is renovation and furnishing. And the idea is that we go into a preschool, identify a classroom, and renovate it as an ECD centre. As many of you know, most of the ECD these days, in many rural schools, although the government has this initiative to introduce ECD, most of the ECD takes place in the open air under trees and so forth. So this is a way of capacitating the schools and doing infrastructural development for the Ministry of Health. Along with that, there's preschool teacher training, and then there's nutrition, health, and parenting. And lastly, birth certification programs, which are all linked into the ECD program. Next slide. Next slide. Okay, so after signing the usual memorandum of understanding with the district, we then moved into consultation with the school development committees and headmasters, and we identified derelict classrooms in virtually every rural school because of rural-urban drift. If derelict classrooms are not being used. So we've never come across a school in all the 200 odd we've visited which have not got a derelict classroom if they're suitable for renovation. And that's a sort of typical one there. Next slide. Then we do community mobilization. We bring the teachers from the surrounding district around the school, sensitize them to the program, and then enlist their help and their participation. So we ask them to supply river sand and bricks, and later on they help to construct playgrounds. The key to this program and why it's so cost effective is that we employ our own builder. We have a qualified builder, tradesman on our staff who supervises and does the management of the program. So when we identify a classroom, he goes in, assesses the classroom, and builds up draws up a bit of quantity, so you know what materials to buy. Then the procurement officer buys the materials and the furniture required. And then we hire building teams. This consists of a tradesman and two labourers who work at standard industry rates. And we agree beforehand how long each school will take to build. So in a way, there's no profit margin in this. They don't go to tender or get quotes and all that sort of thing because everything is at cost. Supply them with paint and nails, and then they proceed and go back to their own schools and build playgrounds. Next one, you can flip through the next couple. Part of the program for each school, when it's renovated, get some kits. Next one, please. Yeah. So overall, sorry that slide's got messed up there a bit. In Jumbo, we built 36 preschools and Shikuti 47, and Lurungazi 62. And we're in the process of renovating schools in Sanyati at the moment. We've completed 36 schools. We have 29 more to do. We find that when a school is completed, the community learns about the school, the numbers go up. And on average, there's at least a 50 to 100% increase in the number of children attending ECD centres. So in Mandora and Gazi in particular, we had to go back and renovate second classrooms in schools to accommodate the children. And that's going to be an ongoing problem. This is the number of kids who have been reached through this program, a total of 15,400 children in those 180 schools. Manned by paraprofessional ECD teachers. There is a scheme abroad with the Ministry of Education to gradually bring in qualified ECD teachers to man the schools. This has been a slow process because of the limited number of qualified teachers available. But I think the ideal situation at the end of the day will be one qualified teacher supervising some paraprofessionals. So when we started this program, it was basically about training the paraprofessionals. But as we progressed and more qualified teachers have come in, they've also requested to be on the training because they find their course doesn't give them the practical experience that they need. Just about the training, these are done at schools. So we don't have accommodation costs. The teachers sleep on the floor on mats, and we provide food and transport. And they do, at the end of every term, they come in for a 5-day course, and they're very well attended and very well appreciated. Next one. These trainings are facilitated by 2 Ministry of Health, ECD district trainers. You know, there's a qualified staff member, a teacher in each district who is supposed to train and supervise the paraprofessionals in each district. So this gives these trainers an opportunity to come together and so as you can see, it's very practical. It's about teaching them practical skills which they can utilise when they go back to their schools. The average cost of the trainings are $50 per teacher per term, so about $150 a year per teacher. And in 2014, just to give the numbers there, we trained 410 paraprofessionals and 44 qualified teachers. Yeah. In regards to the nutrition program, this is the main reason I wanted to come today, because I think this is a very important part of the program, and one which is we found to be essential. If you don't feed ECD children, they don't come to school. And we know that if for some reason the daily meal program is interrupted, the numbers drop off pretty quickly, because you've got 3- and 4-year-old children who are walking 4 or 5, sometimes 10 kilometres to school. And if they don't give them a meal during that time, they're at school, then they can't cope. So I think in all ECD programs in the rural areas, it is essential to have food supply for the kids. So under this program, every child attending ECD in the 4 districts receives a daily meal. At the beginning of the program, we issue each school with cooking pots, plates and utensils for about 60 children. And then at the beginning of every term, we distribute bulk corn-soy blend to each school, and the food is then prepared by volunteer mothers using a roster system. This has been very successful. We've never had a problem with the mothers coming along, and they do it all voluntarily, and it's been very encouraging to see the enthusiasm they've shown kids eating the food. So we not only do this in the schools we renovated, when we move into a district like Sunyati at the moment, we will start this program in all the schools in advance of the renovations. The renovations always lag behind. So here's a school which is waiting to be renovated. You can see that's classroom without a roof. So the moment we're already putting it through the distributing. Next slide. And the kids, even though it seems rather boring to us to have corn-soy blend every day, they seem to enjoy it. So, looking at the figures there, in 2014 we distributed 60,000 kgs of CSB. The number of schools involved was 201, and a total of 17,000 children were given a daily meal throughout the school terms. And this is an amazingly cheap program. That works out at $1 per child per term, or less than 2 cents per child per meal. So using this methodology, it seems to be very sustainable and cost effective. Look at the health program. This links in with the Ministry of Health. I don't know if you all know that one of the roles of the Ministry of Health, one of their policies is to supply support to schools, especially primary schools. So this program helps on that as well. Again, we're using the whole town of ECD centres. We do the health check program in advance of the renovations. And it's open to all infants and children under 5 years. So we don't restrict this to the ECD children. Mothers can bring their babies and infants along. And we find this very much supports the EPI program as well, because as you know, a lot of trouble with transport and Ministry of Health, the EPI programs often not getting out to do their rural rotations. 26,000 infants were reached with this program in 2014, and the activities include health education for the mums. When the mums first come in, they get taught on some subject, nutrition or PMTCT or all those subjects. We monitor kids' growth and make sure they're immunized, and it's also used to distribute family planning supplies, so mothers can also pick up their birth control pills during this visit. We've also, in several districts, in 5 districts, used it as done a pilot on looking at point-of-care HIV testing for these children. That's mothers getting a talk before in advance of the health checks. Next one. The children are weighed and measured. Those who have malnutrition or are undernourished are then referred to a CMAM program at the nearest district hospital or the nearest clinic. Next one. They also check their general health, and if they've got any things like ringworms or other problems, they're also referred to the clinic for treatment. You can see these are very well attended. Each child has his own handheld record, and the mums and fathers turn up. And as I said, the idea of this program is every child who enters primary school will be hopefully well nourished and also fully immunized. These are kids lining up for immunization. You can see the absence of the usual smiles on these kids, because at the other end of this line is someone with a needle. Just briefly on the OIR program, one of the big problems with OIR PMTCT is loss of follow-up, and children who are HIV positive not getting on care and treatment. So we're hopefully looking at developing this to identify those children by their own health cards and recruit them into the program, and we can do point-of-care testing for HIV. And the technology now exists, of course, to do CD4 counts at a school. And this is a technician from the local district hospital that comes out, and those children who want to get tested, or parents want to get tested, can be done on the spot. That's a chemo machine, that little thing with the red thing on top there, that can do CD4 counts on the spot. So one of the challenges in this program, certainly if you just go into school and test all the children for HIV, you get a very low positivity rate, maybe 1 or 2%. So the cost effectiveness of that sort of approach is questionable, but if you then look at the kids who are malnourished, target the kids who are malnourished or have chronic illness or stunted, then I think we get a much higher return. So that's the direction we'll take in future. And I think we want to utilize more of the PMTCT data. The local district hospital or the clinic knows which mothers are HIV positive, and we can use this to try and identify and follow up through the health workers. I think this program is scalable, but at the moment there's no specific funding for it. Another important component of the program is parenting education. Firstly, about the importance of ECD. Not many parents in the rural areas realize the long-term and beneficial impact that ECD education has on their child's overall school performance. It's been well demonstrated this last well into secondary education. This is the topics that are covered in the we have a parenting manual, which moves in 12 monthly cycles, and these are the sort of subjects. So you see a wide range of subjects which are relevant to the parents of young children. Next one. These are very interactive groups. We try and encourage fathers to come along as well, we're bringing people from social welfare or Ministry of Health, etc., to conduct each of these sessions. Lastly, I just want to talk about birth certificates. We also found when we did the baseline studies in these districts that only about 50% of children have birth certificates. And the importance of this, of course, is that children can't sit for exams. Later on, they can't get driver's license or bank accounts and so forth. So it's always been a problem, children in rural districts accessing birth certification. So this program, once a year they go to a school, sensitize the parents to call a meeting and sensitize the parents to the importance of birth certification, and also tell them the documents that are required to allow their child to get a birth certificate. Then the team comes back several weeks later, giving the parents a chance to get the necessary documentation. And then we take them, we have a minibus, and we take them physically to the district registrar's office where they do group registration. So you get 10 or 20 kids registered in one afternoon. And this program is lacking funding at the moment, but in 2013 over 900 children got birth certificates through this program. Just in summary, the important things about this program is that it's integrated into the primary school administrative system, so once the school is established, the headmaster and the school development committee become responsible for it. They also are responsible for supervising the teachers, and as we've just shown, it can also act as an entry point for services other than ECD. All right, thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Dr. Greg Powell. Let me open this session for questions and answers.
Thank you so much, Dr. Powell, for your presentation. My question is a very simple one on the nutrition program. Is there any way that you put, is there anything that you put in place in terms of sustainability for the nutrition program if you decide to move out of the areas where you are operating in? Thank you so much. Because we are doing a similar thing, because we can retain the children in the ECD centers. But however, in terms of sustaining the program, the nutrition program, is something that is very challenging to us.
I'm just wondering why you placed scalability and challenges.
We saw that the food is made available to the school, but I'm wondering about the nutrient content of the food, because we know that the food is there, but is there any nutritionist working with the school to make sure that the school actually really nutritive to the kids? Thank you.
Just in terms of sustainability, we have graduated 2 districts, Chigutu and Jimba, which are the first districts we did, so we have moved out there in terms of having a physical presence in the district. What we did through the donors is give a double cab truck to each district to utilize to service the program. And so what we do is just deliver a truckload of CSB at the beginning of every term to the district offices, and then the district itself distributes it to the individual schools. So far that's been sustainable. I think there's no way cost-wise that the ministry can sustain this program at the moment, but in terms of the administration and so forth, it seems not a heavy duty just to deliver a bulk supply to a district office, and they do the rest. Point taken on the scalability, that's just my ignorance. It's certainly not a challenge, but it was really meant to point out that although this is scalable, there is no funding to do that at the moment, but it's something we'll be pursuing and trying to encourage the OIR PMTCD program to look at this as one way of increasing the number of children on art in rural areas. No, I think CSB is a recognized nutrition product. I mean, it has fortified porridge, basically. We used to at one stage give mahayu as well, but to answer your short question in short, we don't have a nutritionist on the program looking at the overall nutrition. But I think as long as these kids get what is a healthy meal a day, then I think that serves a purpose. But I certainly, if it's scaled up nationally, then we should look at the overall nutritional value.
Just for information regarding registration of children having birth certificates, that the new constitution, based on the instructions that are in the new constitution now, that each child has a right to a name, etc. Department of Social Welfare and I think Registrar's Office are much more facilitatory in that area. So as you move forward, I think you need to engage them and working with them much more closely. Thank you.
My first concern comes from one of your slides, one of the pictures, where the children were washing their hands. I didn't notice some detergents, soap, etc. Was it deliberate?
You didn't notice?
I did notice the detergent, the soap. Yeah, that's the first thing. The second thing is about the food which you are supplying the schools. You said 60,000, is it per year, per month?
Per year.
Per year. And I calculated it translates to about 3.5 kgs per child per year. I'm wondering, is it sufficient from the nutrition point of view? Thank you.
What is the uptake of the pilot POC HIV testing? Thank you.
The biggest obstacle to this program has been the Registrar General, I must say, and especially if you try and do birth registration around the periods of elections, even though you're registering 3 or 4-year-olds, this is seen as a dangerous activity. So we had this program stopped for a year because of we were told that Zimbabwe had the best birth registration system in the world, and they didn't need any help from NGOs. So, but thankfully the elections are now over, so the program's gone back to normal. A good point, not the first one who's made that. I did this presentation once in Germany, and the German professors all put their hands up and said, "Where's the soap? This is a waste of time." I kind of agree with you. We do not supply soap to every school. We kind of hope the school could do that for itself. But again, yeah, I agree. But I think if you go to traditional Shona households, often there's just water. And so I would take your point, and I'll raise that with the program team about introducing soap as well. Some schools use it, but more often than not, I must be honest, they just use water to wash their hands. In terms of point of care testing, there was something like 400 people tested under the pilot, some adults, some children, and the positivity rate, as I said, was only 1 or 2%. So we didn't think that was going to be cost effective overall as a program. But what we want to do now is go back and do targeted testing at the malnourished kids.
I'd just like to find out what strategies are you using to get men involved in the project, especially in the health side. Because from my experience, we as men, we're not really involved, especially with the health side. And from the project that I worked with, it was very difficult to get the men involved, especially when it comes to PMTCT and HIV testing as well.
Just to congratulate you, I think you are doing fantastic work in terms of, supporting education. And it's clear from your presentation that education is human capital and you are catching them young. My key core questions on the course. It might be worth maybe exploring the course either to rehabilitate a building vis-a-vis purchasing modular structures. There are now available modular structures that can be used for ECD that might be cheaper and even more sustainable and durable. Then my other question is on satellite schools. While I think it's good that you are doing your pilot in those conventional schools, it might be just a tip of the iceberg. You might need maybe to do further research on the state of ECD in satellite schools, because it can be more pathetic than the situation you have presented. Then my last comment is on water, sanitation and hygiene availability of those services in the ECDs. I think the earlier question also relates to that. If you can also look at a holistic approach to some of the key entry points.
When we started the parenting programs, we provided a lunchtime meal. And this was a great draw card. We had to stop people coming. So many people turned up, and this was just a meal of suds and relish. But again, that has questions about sustainability. But I think if you, as you saw from the slide, there are quite a few men attending these sessions, and I think this program is not primarily looking at that. And as I said, the POC program was really just a pilot. Male involvement in OIR is a huge issue. We try and encourage mothers on our PMTCT program to, when they come for antenatal clinics, to bring their husbands with them. Husbands are encouraged to come. You have male clubs and so forth to try and motivate men. But it is a problem, and we haven't actually tackled that problem at the moment. In terms of modular structures, that may be something we'd look into. I mean, at the moment, most of these buildings are integrated into the school. They're brick buildings and with asbestos roofs, and I think they're pretty substantial. I think for $1,500, you're probably getting a white ant-proof building, which is not as vulnerable to white ants and be more durable than a modular structure. But certainly in schools where there's no derelict classroom, that would be something to explore. I've just lost what was the third comment? Satellite schools. Yes, this is an issue. You know that for every formal school, there are often 3 or 4 ECD classes going on around the surrounding districts where they're too far from the normal school. We have supplied food to those centres, so they do get part of the feeding program. We haven't done any building there because also we haven't done any building in resettlement areas because we're unsure about the long term, whether these schools are going to exist over a long period. If they're being held in tobacco barns or something, then we'd like the Ministry of Education to designate them as a district school so we can actually be sure that we're not investing in a place which is not going to be sustained. And with regards to the wash, I think you're alluding to the fact of toilets. If the school doesn't have sufficient Blair latrines, then we will construct them as part of the program. And we ask the villagers to contribute there, so the villagers would come and dig the pit for the Blair latrine, and we would supply the bricks and cement for them to construct a Blair toilet for ECD children.
We'll basically go through the findings of the survey that was conducted across the 14 towns. The goal of the survey is what we have up there on the slide. It was to determine the status of the water, sanitation services, and hygiene practices. And the findings, we deliberately tried to disaggregate everything according to gender equity and disability as was requested. And it also aimed at establishing benchmarks which progress and success would be measured. Right? And in conducting the survey, maybe I have to say something on the management structure, how it was organized. Like you heard, this is a survey that was commissioned by the government of Zimbabwe through the Ministry of Local Government, which chairs Eben Wash in the National Action Committee for Water and Sanitation. So, in this case, what happened is the Ministry of Local Government invited Zimstat to conduct the survey. And as you can see on the front here, we have the Ministry of Local Government on the left, Zimstat on the right. They invited Zimstat, and within the Ministry of Local Government, there is a special unit that is working on this project. So that special unit was also working with hand in hand with a survey director who was delegated to work on the survey by Zimstat. And underneath there was the survey committee on the left, which was working with a technical committee within Zimstad. And maybe on the technical committee, I should listen to say that the technical committee was responsible for the technical aspects. These were the subject data specialists who were responsible for things like the drafting the data collection tools and so forth. And in this case, those Zimstad was asked to conduct the survey. Given that they had a lot of other things to do, they could not do the entire survey, so they focused on the quantitative aspects of the survey. So in the end, the management committee had to look for a quantitative data consultant, who in this case is Dr. Jatiza, and also a report writing consultant, who is myself. So what it means is my task was to put together the findings of the quantitative data that came through Zimstad and the findings of qualitative aspects. Right. So in terms of the findings, I'm hoping that by the end of this session, we have said something about to do with the access to services. And here we are looking at the water supply, the sanitation, and the hygiene. And we hope we will also be able to tell who has been providing those services in the different towns. And also whether those services are adequate, as well as the quality of services. And the last thing that we'll talk about is maybe the suggestions that we had in terms of how sales provision can be improved. So the first thing that we'll look at is the water supply. There we have the different facilities that are used in the different towns. But I should point out that the standards in Zimbabwe are such that for urban areas, piped water is the recommended type of the facility for urban areas. So in this case, we are saying people in the first and second categories are the people who are using the recommended facilities, which in this case is 88.9%, close to 90% of the residents are from the 40 towns. Right? And we are also saying that there are sources that are regarded to be of suitable quality. And these are normally regarded as improved sources. And in terms of improved sources, we are saying what we found out was that once access to improved sources was dependent on what the status is indicated in the graph that we have. On the extreme left, in purple, those are the poorest, and on the extreme right, we have the richest. So we are saying it depends on how wealthy one is. Then in terms of the different sources, those are some of the sources that we saw out there. Of course, there are other sources within the dwellings which we do not have on the picture. But because we had towns like Hope and other unsafe areas in the different towns, we have people who are actually using unprotected shallow wells, as you can see before the picture. And we also try to determine where the facilities were located. And in this case, 40% were in own dwelling or connected to the main dwelling, with 34% being somewhere within the residential plot, and the rest being somewhere or elsewhere outside the residential plot. and that is 26%. And in this case, we are also saying location within the residential plot is determined by road status, as we can see on the graph that we have up there. And in terms of those who use the facilities that were outside the residential plot, 83.3% of them had to walk a distance of within 500 meters, and others actually had to go beyond the 500 meters, as we can see up there. And though we had that information that we presented in the first slide, where people indicated their main sources of water, we had 48.8% who actually indicated that they also drank water from other sources. And there were several or different reasons for drinking from these other sources. And in terms of the adequacy, now we go to the adequacy. We found out that close to 40% or 37.9% had access to water from the main source throughout the day. Some had access to water for periods ranging from 4 hours to 24 hours. And in this case, we are saying Plantry had the greatest proportion of households who had water throughout the day, while Pinduna had the lowest at 4.2%. On average, Pinduna had water, I think 4 hours on any particular day. And we found out that the main reason why there were the disruptions in water was because they were pipe-based. And as you can see from the picture on the left, that's somewhere in Chipinge, if I recall, yes, it's in Chipinge. That's a pipe-based, and on the right, water is flowing along the street in Shalani, and that was the major cause of disruptions in water supply in the 14 towns. There were other reasons like mechanical faults, vandalism played a very insignificant part, but pipes were the major reason. Yes. Then in terms of who provided the water, most of the water was provided by local authorities in 65% of the cases, followed by ECD. Then there were other players. Like in the mining towns, the companies associated with the residential areas provided the water. Then, given that we talked about disruptions in water, we also tried to find out how long it normally took for service providers to respond to faults. And in this case, I think most of the residents fell into the category where it took between 3 days to a week for a response to come, though there were a few, 6.7% or so, where it took less than a day. And we also tried to find out what residents normally did whenever there were faults in water supply. And as you can see, most of them indicated that they actually did nothing. They did not report. They just sat in their homes and hoped that maybe water would be restored. And that probably explains why it took relatively long. Then in terms of the water quality, we had close to 15% who did something to their water to make it safe. And this indicates that there were some people within the towns who did not think that the water they were provided was not safe. And for those who were using unimproved sources, 18% of them did not even do something to their water to make it safe. They just consumed it as it was. And when we tried to look for perceptions from the residents in terms of what they thought about the quality of their water, about 65% thought it was either safe or very safe, with the remaining 35% thinking that saying that the water was either unsafe or very unsafe. And why they thought the water, for those who thought the water was unsafe, they had different reasons. But what we found out was that they had different ways of determining or maybe measuring the safety of water vis-a-vis the methods that were used by the service providers. In this case, they relied on things like the odor, the taste, the color, and so forth. So in this case, we see that most of them used the odor to determine the safety of water. And maybe that would mean that they were not well informed. Then in terms of access to the sanitation facility, what is recommended for urban areas in Zimbabwe is toilets that flush either to a sewer system or septic tank. So in this case, we have those in the first two categories. Those are the people who are using the recommended facilities for urban areas. And in this case, we are also saying ownership of the right type of facility was also dependent on wealth. As you can see, the lonelier one became, the more chances we had to own the right type of, or use the right type of facility. Then on their location, some were located within the dwelling, and that applied to 73% of the residents in the 14 towns. Some, for 14%, the toilet was located somewhere within the residential plot. Then for 13%, they actually had to walk outside the residential plot. But for those who had the toilet on the residential plot, we are also saying it was related to wealth, as we can see on that chart. In terms of management of the sewer system, for those who were using the private sewer systems, 49% indicated that they were actually satisfied with the management of the system, while 9.9% were very satisfied, which means above 50% of the residents in the 40 towns were satisfied. But while we are saying that, we know that 38.6 had experienced sewer blockages at least once 6 months prior to the survey. And given that those blockages had been experienced, we also tried to find out how long it took for those faults to be attended to. And for most of the people, it also took 3 days to a week. In this case, it's 41.6%. Then in terms of the public facilities, the public toilets, the main issues that we identified is that the first has to do with poor lighting. There is poor lighting in most of these toilets, such that At night, people are very reluctant to go in there, which promotes open defecation. For those who are courageous enough to go in there at night, they end up leaving themselves closest to the entrance, thereby messing the toilet. And we also found out that water is not always available, water either for cleaning or for flushing. So these are, in most cases, in a very unpleasant state. Then the flushing systems are also malfunctioning in most of these toilets, and there is no privacy. The cubicle doors are either damaged or missing, and for that reason, people generally do not want to use those toilets. And also cases of poor maintenance are quite common, and the local authorities actually confirmed that. So those are some of the toilets that we came across in the different towns. I think the two at the top are somewhere in Bindura, then the other one must be Rishane, the other one in Chipinge. But generally, that's what it looks like across the 40 towns. In terms of solid waste management, we noted that for some, they used bins that were collected by the council. Another group used undesignated sites, the dumping, the unofficial dumps, and others actually used the composting method. Then in terms of the problems with solid waste management, the first thing is that there is non-separation of waste at the point of generation, whereby the biodegradable and the non-biodegradable are just mixed. And the official dump sites for the different towns are not ever compliant, such that in some cases, these towns have been fined by EMA because their facilities do not comply to the recommended standards. I think this is true for almost all the towns. Then in terms of the collection for those who are using bins, at times it's very infrequent, and this is mainly caused by things like transport. For some who do not have the dump trucks, they use things like tractors which they share with other departments. They are not, they're just for the solid waste collection. And in such cases, they are not always available. And it creates problems. Then in terms of frequency of waste collection for those, we have the bins. Then on the customer care, 75%, we found out that they were saying they actually go to the service provider paying or when they want to pay for the services. And in this case, 57% of them were saying the staff and the service provider paying are helpful and friendly. The 90%, I don't think they were saying helpful. I'm sorry, I'm forgetting the other category. The others were saying they are just friendly and so forth. But what we established is that residents were generally not aware of service provider customer care policies and their entitlements. And besides that, the service providers themselves, they were conscious of the need for effective interaction with the residents. And because of this, some of them now have customer care plans customer service charters. Then 24% participate in health clubs, which are generally talking about hygiene issues. And in terms of hand washing, that is linked to eating. Those are the percentages that we have. And hand washing linked to defecation or urination, we have 79.8%, and 46% who are saying we wash hands when at it. There we were just trying to determine whether they know the critical hand washing times. And also in terms of hygiene, we looked at the frequency of cleaning the toilets. And in this case, 97% indicated that they clean the toilets on a daily basis. And 86 or 87% were actually using tissue paper for hand cleansing. Then in terms of the presence of hand washing infrastructure, they used a variety of hand washing facility in the toilet, in the house, or in the yard. And on average, for those who had it in the toilet, 29% the residents who indicated that they had it in the toilet, 38% saying it was somewhere in the house, the remainder said it was somewhere in the yard. Those are in the middle, we are saying Shiruk, for instance, had the highest proportion of residents saying that it was somewhere in the toilet, with Chinese saying being the lowest in that regard. And that also applies for the rest of the. Then we noted that there were barriers to equitable access to wash services. And in this case, we noted that it had to do with the demand side factors and the supply side factors. On the supply side factors, there were issues to do with the resources, where the service providers were not adequately endowed with the resources to provide the relevant services. And at times, the service providers, they were not adequately coordinated to provide the service. And also the structures for relating with the users, they were not well defined. It's only now that I think most of them are beginning to have these charters that I talked about, the client charters. Then on the demand side, we found that in the poor areas or the newly settled areas in the different towns, where poverty is common, in most cases, those were the service deficient areas in terms of water, sanitation, and also hygiene. And also disability was a factor in terms of access. In some cases, the facilities were not disability friendly. And in such cases, the disabled did not have adequate access. And also other vulnerabilities like age and the location that I talked about earlier. There were also factors that affected access. Then in terms of the conclusions, we made a number of conclusions, but we brought out a few which we thought would be relevant for this discussion, where we are saying there's probably need to make efforts to bring water supply facilities closer to users, because we know that others are walking beyond the recommended distance. And in this case, we are saying the local authorities will either phase developing the facilities or partner with private players. And we are also suggesting that the local authorities would consider phase the remapping exercise of their pipe network with the view to undertake comprehensive upgrades. Why we are saying this is because in almost all the towns, the situation is such that the pipe network, the map for the pipe network is unknown to most of the people who are in the sections that attend to the. So it is very difficult for them to make upgrades at the moment, such that there is need to do a remapping of those pipes. And we are saying the local authorities need to consider providing the poor with low cost and standard toilets on a cost and cover basis. Because we noted that there are some who are using toilets that are recommended, and another percentage, which in this case is 2%, who do not have access to any form of facility, and supposedly these practice open defecation. Then we are also suggesting that they should probably consider community management of toilets and public places, because what has been happening is these toilets are either poorly maintained at the moment, or they have now been intended to pay toilets, but not all the people can afford to use those paid toilets. And this also promotes objectification. Then probably the last one has to do with the strengthening the hygiene education efforts that focuses on behavior change. And because we say there is a lot of mistrust between the residents and the service providers, maybe there is need for confidence building between the two. Thank you very much.
Is there a budget set, having done the survey, now to go and give a feedback and provoke dialogue amongst the providers and the residents? Thank you.
I find it very difficult to follow your slides because the key important information was missing from the start. So we're looking at the study design, the methodology, and the population. What I picked was a mixed method study with both qualitative and quantitative. But I wasn't sure whether the qualitative, whether it was in-depth interviews, was it group discussions, was it literature review, and then you only had percentages to say 25%, 30% of what number. So we needed that key information to make an informed decision and to understand where you're coming from. Then my question is this data available in an open format so that whoever wants to do further analysis on it can then go ahead and play around with it? So for example, all the comparisons that you've done, I'm interested to do it by city, to say out of the 14 towns, how do they compare to each other in terms of sanitation, water quality. Then some of the issues that we talked about as well are dependent on participant characteristics. So if you look at things like hand washing, what's the distribution of hand washing among different demographic distributions, according to age groups, according to wealth, according to literacy, according to education? Then how do you define some of these terms? Things like wealth. Were they based on household assets? Were they based on income levels? Were they based on what? So all that was all missing. And so that was very difficult to then understand the presentation. But thank you for the presentation.
From the scope of the baseline survey, water quality testing was not necessary. But I would like to believe that this could have been done separately, because there was another component of the study that specifically sought to to look at the I can say the infrastructure, and that could have involved the water quality testing. I'm not sure, maybe someone will assist me there. Then in terms of disaggregation, yes, I think I should admit that this particular presentation, maybe there is very little on that, but we did try to disaggregate by gender, disability. In fact, we had an entire section on that, in which case I would like to apologize for not having included it in this presentation. Then in terms of whether there is a budget, I'm also not sure whether I will be the right person to answer that. But from my understanding, it's something that is already going on in the 14 towns, in which case I think I can confidently say there must be a budget. Then in terms of methodological issues, it's unfortunate I did not say much on the methodology, the sampling and so forth. But in terms of the qualitative, yes, they used different methods, like the key format interviews, the focus group discussions, the observations, the transect drives, and so forth. Then on whether data can be accessed by those who may want to do analysis. From my understanding, this data belongs to the Ministry of Local Government. And I'm not sure whether they can give it to whoever requests for it. Maybe it's for the Ministry of Local Government to answer. In terms of the institutional structure was set up, maybe I'll ask Dr. Chatiza to respond to that one. That is whether we managed to look at things like revenue collection, efficiency, non-revenue water, blah, blah, blah.
I'll try to respond quickly to some of the questions that I thought I put. We did explore the structures in the organizations, and in the report there's an annex that shows the level of staffing in the key departments. So we could make that, I think through UNICEF, that part could be made available. That table shows even a number of variables. If we had time, we could flip it and you would see what we had. So that the different dynamics in terms of each individual local authority would be available. The other question that I thought I could also quickly respond to is on availability of data. I think the data is available, like Alan says, and even the interview transcripts, the focus group discussion notes, and things like that. Again, it's a question of them talking to the technical committee and hearing that. And as you will appreciate, for the study of the nature that it was, there was a lot of it. And some of it was never eventually utilized, but it's available for secondary analysis. Thank you.
I saw in the paper this morning that the Minister of Local Government has given the authority for a rural district council or a rural town to introduce prepaid water meters. This is obviously a hot topic at the moment. Did you look at that issue at all in terms of the survey? And what do you think the impact of introducing a prepaid system into one of these rural towns would be?
We have privilege to have Dr. Power, who is so knowledgeable that 25 years ago, when I asked for one professor for pediatrician, he said, Power is better than me. And they're still active. But I like to send message from here straight to New York United Nations Children's Fund. We have to start from children to teaching them. Is a taboo subject is washing on the backside after the release. We have only in Muslim countries in toilet water, and no another toilet you can't find water. I remember I was in Libya. They have that was first time I saw how this Muslim culture is higher, that we all have another part in the religion. No one teaching children, as I do, how to wash themselves. And also adult. Adult is using here, especially in the village, or newspaper that is lead, that's poison. Or they go outside and using the grass or something. And the rectum is sensitive area, and we have to start talking about this because, as I told, that is taboo subject. And how we everything, teaching children writing, also we have to start teaching children how to do this. That is very important subject, because we can see so many infections coming from backside to up, and we have to do something. And this in this country, if you will go in any the rural area toilet, no paper, no water, nothing. And if they will wash if we will supply them with water to wash their backside, they will also wash the hands. And please, is any possibility that from this meeting go straight in New York to the United Nations office to start to think and make program for this subject. Thank you.
The reason why we discuss about water and sanitation is directly linked to the health status of a community. I was also interested in knowing what's the relationship between the towns which were studied, as well as maybe the disease pattern, as well as maybe the malnutrition or some other conditions that might be related directly to the issues of water and sanitation.
What was the rationale for capturing the perceptions on water safety? In my thinking, I thought it was more relevant to test water quality and also the access by people to clean water.
The first one is concerning the institutional structures or setup. Did you also manage to look into the institutional setup for these for the small towns, like within the municipalities, and also issues relating to that? For example, issues which are for revenue collection efficiency. Did you look into that as well? Because I did not see anything relating to that. Then also the issues relating to non-revenue water. Because I believe that baseline information should inform implementation. And such issues are very important, so that at the end of the implementation, you can easily measure the impact of the project. My other question is relating to water quality testing. Was this done? Because I think you mentioned something relating to that, and also what residents, the perception from the residents. But from the actual data, did you manage to collect the actual water quality, maybe at the point of treatment, source, and also at point of use, so that we can easily determine if contamination is happening at source or maybe at point of use, something like that? Then it's also easy to measure the impact of implementation. Then the other question is on public facilities. I think on maybe one of your last slides you mentioned the disability issues. Because I was thinking that you were going to mention a lot about the special focus. Because you said this baseline specifically, it was an overall baseline, but it had a special focus on disability, gender, and the other issue, I forgot, yeah. But I didn't see much of statistics relating to that. So from my point of view, I think it's lacking, or maybe it's there in the document you were trying to summarize, I'm not sure.
We also had questions to do with whether the residents would be prepared to have prepaid water meters. And the answer for most of the residents was that they were not willing to have prepaid meters. And I am sure this is a debate that is ongoing. Others have approached it from the constitutional point of view, whereby water is now regarded as a human right in our constitution. That is very clear. But at the same time, there are also issues to do with the payment for services. For the local for the service provider to be able to provide a service, there has to be some kind of payment. And related to that as well, we also looked at willingness and ability to pay for service. And for most people who said, who were not prepared to pay for service, they were saying they could not afford it. But obviously that is debatable. Then on his contribution, where maybe there is need to start educating children on positive practices while they are still young, I think I would like to believe that that is the point that is being noted. Then in terms of relating the revenue that is collected to the funds that are actually plowed back for service provision, I'm not sure whether the scope of work actually required us to do that, unless I missed something, Dr. Nadir. Maybe you have something to say on that, if I'm wrong. Then also the relationship between the towns and the disease patterns, or why those particular towns were prioritized. I'm sure UNICEF or the Ministry of Local Government will be the best people to respond to that. Then on the rationale for capturing safety and perceptions on the safety of water as opposed to actual testing of water on the study. Like I said before, yes, maybe I should acknowledge that there was need to determine the actual quality of the water and say something about the actual quality of water. But maybe the limitation was such that the actual testing of the water was not within the scope of the baseline survey. And maybe for that reason, maybe we can say it was a weakness in the design of the survey.
We use the secondary data methods to just check whether the water account for each of the 40 local authorities was ring-fenced or not. So I'm just getting a yes and a no, and the statistics are available. The second point to make is around the willingness to pay. I think increasingly, particularly from the qualitative discussions we had, we realized that willingness to pay or the resistance to pay, apart from the comments as already made, was also about valuation of the service and the service provided. So it wasn't only about I am able or I am able to pay. It was also about I don't think they are worth giving that from the citizen side. They felt in some of the discussions, maybe it's not worth paying for the money. So willingness to pay, I think is increasingly becoming a much more complex concept to explore.
I'll just try to be brief and combine, the concerns that have been raised. In terms of revenue and expenditure, some of these things you see not covered in the scope of this particular study are covered in another way. We do have a consulting firm, an engineering firm that also looks at institutional arrangements. They're doing an institutional assessment, which gives a very detailed overview of what happens in terms of the institutional arrangements and the councils. And for revenue and expenditure, we have actually also, as a Small Towns Watch project, looked at these institutional aspects of the councils. For water quality and even the non-revenue water collection, this project also has a rehabilitation component. And one of the tasks of the consulting firm that does the supervision is to look at the water quality pre-intervention and after the intervention. Also to look at within the data available, also how much is being produced and how much is being lost, so the council is able to get an indication of the non-revenue water that's been available. Of course, we also look at how to disseminate further. There have been 2 sets of validation already, in which councils where there are other stakeholders, national level validation to disseminate this finding, and we are currently working on modalities for having town-specific information information put together in a package, highlighting the specificities of each town, and this will be shared with the towns, in addition to the fact that they've been part of the validation of all of this at this moment.
The Small Towns Watch program is a, let's say, second or third phase when it comes to rehabilitation of water and sanitation systems that is funded by the government of Australia. And the Small Towns Watch program has 3 components. One that is the hardware component that deals with the rehabilitation of the water and sanitation system. The second component that is related to what we call the software, that has to do with hygiene promotion, has to do with customer care, has to do with relationship between the residents and the service provider. And the third component that has to do with the institutional capacity building of the local authorities to be able to provide the services. And that includes billing systems, that includes operation and maintenance capacity, and so on. The survey that we have seen today, or the results that we have seen today, corresponds only to the baseline of the social indicators. So we're talking about the status of the water systems, the status of the pumps, the status of the pipes, the water quality monitoring, and so on. Those have been covered under the infrastructure component. So that's probably something that we needed to put up front at the beginning of the presentation, to mention this is only one subset of information that fits into the program that we are running. And just to respond to one of the questions about the budget and everything, there is a budget attached to this, and again, this is a budget provided by the government of Australia, which we are implementing, that deals with the rehabilitation of water and sanitation systems in these 14 towns, and also with hygiene promotion, and also with support of institutional capacities for handling the services. Why I mentioned the keyword rehabilitation is because what we are doing here is to bring the services back in operation. Unfortunately, we are seeing the need for expanding and upgrading the systems, but within the budgetary capacity of the program.
The required funding envelope is beyond the capacity of what Australia alone can do. So this baseline, I think, just gives us a snapshot of the state of affairs in all the urban towns. But if you look, the focus is on small towns. We've got growth points in Zimbabwe. We've got also other institutions that require the same support. So let me just take this opportunity to challenge others who have got funding to also join the race and support this noble cause. Just a few observations from my end.
Just one.
I only have got 3, Madam Nzinge, if you can allow me. I think they will add value. The first one is that Zimbabwe is one of the countries with rapid urbanization. Then my other observation is on standards. This baseline resonates so well with the World Bank service level benchmarking, among other national documents that are available. But what is a bit surprising is that it seems in Zimbabwe we've set our standards too high. I was just looking at the environment management comment that was made by the consultants that of all the 14 towns, none of the 14 towns had a compliant landfill. I think we need to introspect as a country to say we are a resource-constrained country. Do we set our standards too high, or we need to look at standards that we can actually achieve in relation to our resources? Because my understanding is that Zimbabwe only has got one town, which is Noto, with the support again of Australia and GIZ, where they've supported a landfill that is compliant to EMA standards. So again, we've got this polluter pay principle, but I've never witnessed any town in Zimbabwe where EMA has actually worked back with the affected town to reinvest some of the money. Then let me lastly also challenge, I've seen a couple of colleagues from research institutions here, the National Research Institute, or PRTI, among others. If you look at the investment that was put, the emergency rehabilitation and risk reduction program that my colleague Jesus referred to, Australia, including other donors, we put 40 million. We also had to put 30 million into this small towns program. There are other urban programs, the Zim Fund, among others, where again donors have actually put millions of dollars. But if you look at the participatory health and hygiene, it's a bit depressing to note that we are basically regressing in terms of behavior change. So I think while this is just a baseline, let me also challenge all of us to also, arise to the occasion and ensure that there are a lot of underlying assumptions, in terms of the implementation of this program, but all that needs to be anchored on operations research to ensure that we move forward.
I just want to hear from you from your research. When it comes to hygiene promotion and education, you mentioned about health clubs, but I want to know from your findings how visible are they, how active have they been, and how much have they contributed to knowledge hygiene practices in terms of hygiene promotion in the education. Thank you.
Capturing people's perceptions is not a limitation per se, but it's actually, the way you perceive things influence your behavior. If you perceive that the soda is not safe for drinking, you're going to take measures to address the situation or look for alternative sources. So capturing how people perceive their water system or their water supplies is not a limitation per se, though it is also important to actually test the waters, but just getting to see how people perceive the water is important because it determines how they're going to behave. Perceptions do influence behavior. So if you perceive that this water is not clean, either you boil it or you filter it or you look for alternative sources of water. So I think it's important.
There are different partners, implementing partners who are working in those towns. And where there were no health clubs, they started establishing them. So, to some extent, I can say they exist or they are in the process of being established in all the towns. And as to how much they have contributed in terms of encouraging a positive hygiene behavior, at the moment I think it is very difficult to say. Maybe that is something that we can only be able to say at the end of the project. Thank you.
Let me take this opportunity to thank the presenters, Dr. Greg Powell, who has just left, Mr. Chikwaira, Dr. Chatiza. I also want to thank all of us who have come here today to physically participate in this program session, and also thanking you for your patience. We know that we usually finish at 2 o'clock latest, but today, because of the demand, we could not make it that time. I also want to thank our virtual participants, particularly from Mashimbo. There's a group that has been gathered together and they're participating from Mashimbo with support from Solidamed. There are also certain individuals who are participating virtually. We could watch from the screen. We want to thank you. Let me also take this opportunity to invite you again Next month, end of October, last Wednesday of October, we will notify you of the brown bag for that session. Thank you so much and have a blessed day.